All right, so here are the 5 things to consider when looking at short-term rentals in Breckenridge, Colorado. Number 1, the town ordinance. Did you know that the town of Breckenridge imposed a new ordinance to limit short-term rentals in the town of Breckenridge? And basically what that looks like is that they have divided up the town into 4 different zones, one being the resort zone, the others being zones 1 through 3. The resort zones intended for short-term rentals, and zones 1 through 3 varying in ability to short-term rent. Now, the idea of this town ordinance was to limit the amount of short-term rentals for areas that were intended for locals and people who live here long-term, and imposed a license cap system for short-term rental licenses, which I will go through right now. So, number 2, resort zone properties. These are properties with amenities like a 24-hour on-site front desk, 24-hour on-site management, and 24-hour private security. The thought with the town was that these properties were really built for short-term rentals, and in the event that there is a complaint with a short-term renter or something needs to be taken care of, it can be handled by either the front desk, the on-site management, or the private security that's there. So these properties will forever be able to get a short-term rental license going forward, whether the property resells or it transfers ownership. So if you're looking for a short-term rental property in Breckenridge, look for resort zone properties. Number 3, properties in zones 1 through 3. Zone 1 is the tourism zone. Now, these properties were certainly intended for short-term rentals. However, they do not have amenities like a 24-hour front desk, on-site management, or security. So they're typically smaller condo buildings and some townhomes scattered around the west side of Main Street, closer to the ski resort. That being said, there are a couple hundred licenses available in Zone 1, so the cap is set higher than the active number of licenses. So if you're looking for a property to generate some short-term rental revenue, I highly recommend looking in Zone 1. Now there's Zone 2, which is the downtown core area, basically properties surrounding Main Street, a couple of historic homes, some condos. There are only a couple hundred properties in this zone, and they've set the cap at a lower number than the active number of licenses. So as of right now, you cannot get a license in Zone 2, but likely through resale and transfer of ownership, licenses will become available in the next few years. But for right now, you cannot get a license in Zone 2. And then there's Zone 3, the single family residential area, or what the locals like to call the neighborhood zone. Basically, the town felt that this zone was intended for long-term locals and county and town workers. So they don't think short-term rentals belong in this neighborhood, and they made that very clear with their licensing cap system in Zone 3. They set the cap to well below the active number of licenses. That active number is around 1,200 licenses right now, and they set the cap at a little over 300 licenses. So they're planning to get rid of 900 licenses through resale and transfer of ownership, and some owners forgetting to renew their license. So if you're looking at properties in Zone 3 and you're thinking you want to generate some short-term rental revenue, I would just say forget it for right now, until the next 8 years goes by and we get new council members, change the rules, then maybe. But if these license caps end up staying, then it's going to be an incredibly long amount of time before licenses become available in Zone 3. So having all of these zones, again, I recommend Resort Zone and Zone 1 if you're looking to short-term rent in Breckenridge, Colorado. Next, we have the Breckenridge Lodging Tax, which a lot of people don't even factor in when they're running their numbers. It is significant, totaling 12.275%. So you can pretty much write that off of your gross revenue every year. What that includes is the state tax of 2.9%, the town tax of 2.5%, the accommodations tax, which basically means that anybody with a short-term rental license or running a lodge or a hotel has to pay this accommodations tax. That accommodations tax is 3.4%. The other taxes are the multi-jurisdictional housing authority tax at 0.725%, the county and town tax at 2%, and the mass transportation system tax at 0.75%. This tax goes to provide free transportation around the town, so I think it's actually a pretty good tax. And again, all of these taxes are totaling 12.275%, so it's definitely a huge chunk of revenue that you're going to be losing every year just to taxes. And then finally, we have number 5, property management. Property management, whether you're going to manage yourself or you're going to use a property management company, is something that you have to consider when having a short-term rental property. If you are not familiar with Airbnbs or managing short-term rentals, it is something that is imperative to having a successful Airbnb. My fiance and I have 2 of our own, and we know how important property management is. Property management consists of things like cleaning, when things break, having handymen or technicians coming out to repair them, managing bookings, responding to guests on Airbnb, helping tourists who aren't familiar with the area understand where they're going. There's a lot that goes into it. So I highly recommend, if you're not living here and managing full-time, or if you're not a short-term rental investor and manage full-time, that you should use a property management company. And property management companies out here are not cheap. At minimum, they charge 25%, and I've seen as high as 40 to 50% in some cases. But to have a property management company that is here actively managing a bunch of different properties, they can be here to answer any questions for your guests. They can be here to fix any issues. They can be here to clean. It certainly is a huge weight lifted off your shoulders that you don't have to think about, but you are paying for it. And at minimum 25%, that is a very steep fee, and that is just part of your revenue that you're just not going to see every year. On the flip side of that, if you can manage yourself, it is highly lucrative. As I mentioned before, my fiance and I have a couple of short-term rentals out here, and we manage ourselves. We basically just hire a cleaner that does the cleanings for us, and the Airbnb guest pays the cleaning fee, so that doesn't even come out of our pocket, and we don't have to go utilize our time to go clean. However, we do clean about once a month just to inspect our units to make sure everything is copacetic. And then I'm pretty handy myself, so if anything breaks, I'm more than happy to fix it. We manage the bookings ourselves, and any messages that come through on Airbnb in between the 2 properties. We're spending less than half an hour a day answering guests. So I think for the amount of extra revenue that we generate in managing ourselves, it's totally worth it. And then on top of that, because we manage ourselves, we allow one-night bookings. And most property management companies just don't do that because it doesn't fit into their schedule. And with those one-night bookings, we're able to generate anywhere from 10 to 15 grand a year in extra gross revenue. So that's a huge chunk of change that a property management company just won't be able to get you. And then you couple that with the fact that we're not paying the 25% management fee, we are grossing significantly more than most other investors out here. So if short-term rental investing is your primary gig, I highly recommend looking into managing it yourself. You can get a list of cleaners out here. There's a host of them. There's a host of handymen, and there's actually some property management companies that will do a hybrid system where they will charge you about 10% to basically clean and have a technician come out and fix anything that's broken, but they will allow you to manage the bookings through Airbnb. So there are certainly options out there, but just know that if you're looking at short-term rentals here in Breckenridge, that between property management fees of minimum 25% and the Breckenridge Lodging Tax of 12.275%, you're giving away basically 38% of your revenue every year just to fees, and that doesn't even include HOA or property taxes and insurance. So that's something that you should consider when looking at short-term rentals here in Breckenridge. Now again, with this new town ordinance and these short-term rental restrictions, things for the last few years were changing almost weekly, and likely they will keep changing as we review these policies and their consequences going forward. So if you have any questions about short-term rentals in Breckenridge, reach out to me. I'm happy to help. If you have any other questions about Breckenridge in general and Summit County and this awesome community that we live in, I'm happy to answer those questions for you. Leave a comment below. I'll leave my phone number and email in the description so you can reach out to me. And I will see you guys in the next video.